Hi, I'm Vaughn Palmer here at the BC Legislature with my colleague Rob Shaw. Ground zero for the pending royal visit, but we'll get to that in a minute. There's actually some housing news this week, Rob.
Yeah, it was actually a busy news week, starting with the $500 million affordable housing plan the Premier had promised, using some of the revenue from the real estate sector and the foreign buyer tax. Ambitious plan, Vaughn. Talk about accelerated timelines. They want projects in the go by the end of March, and it's kind of a program set up to improve the rental housing market, but also give government a series of actual, campaign-style events leading up to the election where they can say that they're doing something on the rental file.
Yeah, you get an idea how accelerated this is. The plan that was announced for rental housing, seniors housing, student housing, disabled housing, that plan that was announced in February called for $50 million worth of units to be approved this year. They're now talking about tenfold, $500 million worth of units approved, not built obviously, by the end of the financial year, which is March 31st, and just in time for the election. So the government doesn't lack for ambition on this file. We'll have to watch, I think, Rob, to see where they actually hit the target.
Yeah, they gave us a bunch of numbers during the briefing on how much foreign buyer activity sales and the real estate sector sales they were going to need to reach their revenue targets. That came into question later in the week, actually, when we started to see the first numbers on the impact of residential real estate sales in Metro Vancouver after the foreign buyer tax. I mean, this is kind of an indication, just basically went like that, an almost complete drop-off and a massive rush to get in under the deadline before the tax came into effect.
I've seen a lot of government programs over the years. I haven't seen one that produced results as fast as this one in a while. The government said it was bringing in a special tax on foreign buyers of real estate within Metro Vancouver to essentially drive down the numbers of people doing that. And so we go from 1 month before the tax kicks in, $2.2 billion worth of real estate sales in Metro, residential, linked to foreign buyers, down to 17 million. You said 97% drop. Now, the government says, don't make too much of this. It's only the first month's results. There was a spike. Things may even out. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the Premier, though, was not apologetic at all about it. This is exactly what the government wanted to happen, she said, and that's the big impact that the middle-class British Columbians who want to own a home expected her to do, and we see a corresponding spike in her approval rate in a poll that came out this week from Angus Reid saying it's gone way up because of the popularity of the foreign buyer tax.
Now, we don't get too carried away covering polls, Rob. I remind people that 5 weeks before the last election, Christy Clark had the lowest approval rating she's had in all the time in her office. 5 weeks later, she won the election. So that's polling for you. Of course, housing is not the big news in the provincial capital. Our hometown is absolutely agog over one of the most anticipated royal visits in a long time, maybe the most anticipated since Prince William's parents visited British Columbia 30 years ago to open Expo.
Yeah, Victoria is a hotspot for royals, as you can imagine. It is.
Well, the town is named after the late Queen, as people here still talk about it.
They will get bigger crowds here than perhaps anywhere else they could have visited in Canada. But, it is going to be the news item in the next week. Yeah. And I think the provincial government realizes that, because the other thing going on is UBCM, also in Victoria. Typically, there's a lot of news generated from that. We were expecting something from the Premier in her speech on housing affordability. We may still get some news out of it, but I think there's a recognition from the province. Everyone is paying attention to the Royals. Now is not the time to launch another big news item.
Premier's speech to the Union of BC Municipalities is usually a big deal. It's usually the last day. They've moved the speech to Wednesday afternoon, and they've passed the word that they don't, there'll be news, but nothing like what there would normally be. Everybody recognizes that the Royals get all the attention. They're a more positive story, I would have to say, too. And I guess we'll be back at the end of next week, just as the visit is wrapping up, to talk to you again.